Archives. What I'm going to be talking about today is I'd like to give just a very basic overview of some of the planning considerations that are important if you're considering a digital archive project or a digital library project of any kind. Some considerations about what would be appropriate or perhaps inappropriate materials to consider for a digital library project, and some of the basic strategies of how to do that and the costs involved, so that you can make some more intelligent decisions perhaps on how to plan it. My own experience with this is being through the Rutgers Court Web project, which we've been running for about 4 years now, and what we've been doing is making deals with all of the New Jersey courts to publish their opinions online. It's worked very well so far, mostly because we haven't had to do the kinds of things that I'm going to be talking about today. Fortunately, we've been able to make arrangements where the courts have been able to provide us with their new opinions as they come out in WordPerfect or Word format. So it's already in digital format. All we have to do is process it, and we can have computers do most of that. We can do it on a very tight budget and do it effectively. One of the deals that we made was with the New Jersey Office of Administrative Law, and they came actually looking for us once they saw what we were doing with the regular Article 3 courts in New Jersey. And they had been publishing with Barclay Publishers. Barclay Publishers got bought out by West Publishing, and West Publishing looked at the amount of money that they were making by publishing the New Jersey administrative law decisions and very quickly dropped them from publication. They started looking around, and we agreed to start publishing their stuff. The New Jersey administrative law is kind of odd the way it functions because they have administrative law judges which issue opinions. We've been getting them in digital format very nicely. But then, within 60 days, each commissioner of a department in New Jersey comes out with a final judgment. So far, none of them are cooperating at all. So the real important stuff. So the OAL has been sending us in paper format all of the stuff that they get, and then we've had to figure out a way to put that online. So we had to start grappling with the idea of how to convert paper into digital format and publicize it quickly and efficiently. We've also been writing some grant proposals to try and digitize all the older New Jersey court cases that we don't have online yet, everything pre-1994. And so I've been having to research how to do that in the most cost-effective manner. And this is what I've discovered. First, the proper goals of a digital library project. First, why should you digitize material? First of all, one of the sets of goals that you can have would be something like document preservation. You have older material that's crumbling or stuff that you just want to save in another format. To save shelf space, that is something that I've seen lots of discussion on. Our books are, our shelves are filling up. Our administration doesn't want to buy new shelf space because they're all turned on by technology and they don't see why we should be buying books anymore. We should get into digital libraries to save shelf space so we won't have to buy books. Another thing is public service goals, to allow remote access to materials so that people don't have to travel far to come into a library. To create enhanced access to materials. You can have search engines, you can have all kinds of indexing on digital materials that perhaps you can't do with some print materials. Generate cool publicity. Personally, I think this is a completely valid reason to have a digital library. Publicity, especially for a library, is always a good thing. For each of these goals, there's a cost-benefit analysis. As far as document preservation is concerned, digitization is just not efficient. Having it photographed, put onto microfiche is much more cost-effective. Sending it out to a preservation company to have the thing rebound, dipped in, the acid neutralizers, as expensive as that may be, it's cheaper than digitizing. Same thing with saving shelf space. Renting off-site storage, having compact storage put in, in the long run is actually, and surprisingly enough, I was very surprised when I found this, is generally cheaper than digitizing material. As far as public service goals go, however, allowing remote access, you can do a lot of things with digital materials that you just can never do with a book. Creating enhanced access, again, same situation. Generating cool publicity, you know, once it's up there, you can advertise it to everyone, and you're the person doing it. So what is the successful initiative? As I said before, the cost of digitizing is generally greater than shelf space or traditional forms of preservation. So when you're considering what kinds of materials would be appropriate for a digital library format, it's public service goals and not curatorial or technical goals. Again, don't digitize to conserve, digitize to expand your resources. And as far as cost is concerned, that's something to keep in mind. I know when we first started thinking about other digital library considerations, you know, what could we do if we had some equipment to start digitizing stuff? The first thing we thought about was saving our precious shelf space and, you know, preserving some stuff that may be falling apart. But that kind of thing, again, it's just not cost effective. But thinking in terms of expanding our offerings and doing something new, we would be spending money on doing it, but those are the kinds of things that will work. Again, what's good to do? High value items, rare books, books that are in very high demand, that would be very valuable for people to be able to have remote access to, high visibility. And again, as I said earlier on, if you can get items in digital format to begin with, it cuts out all of the problems that I'm going to be talking about, and much easier to do. Okay, basically there are two methods available for a digital library project. The first is conversion to text, either by double keying or scanning and proofing, or conversion to image. Is everybody familiar with what I mean by the terms double keying and scanning and proofing? Anybody not familiar? Okay, basically, double keying is probably the most popular way to digitize materials to a text format. And what it actually consists of is sending it out or hiring a team of typists and having them retype all the material from scratch. It's actually a big business right now to have it done. What happens in double keying is you actually have two separate typists do the typing, and you get two versions of the retyped material. Then you have a third person who integrates the two with reference to the original. That seems like an awful lot of work, and it is an awful lot of work, and it's very expensive, and it gives you a very high degree of accuracy with the resulting new text that gets sent back to you. Scanning and proofing is perhaps an attempt to make this more efficient. You use a scanner to scan it into some sort of image format, use OCR software to convert it to text, optical character recognition, and then, you know, at the 95% accurate rate that OCR usually comes out with good materials, you have somebody then go through and proofread and correct and reformat. Again, a very labor-intensive kind of project. It's a little cheaper than double keying. The other option, again, is to scan it or photograph it, convert it to some type of image format, and then leave it as an image. Conversion to text. Time and cost are involved. Here are just some figures. I'm just going to, you probably don't want to write these down, but I'm going to go through them anyway. An average key punch operator can work at about 2.4 kilobytes per, actually, the average page, double spaced, is about 2.4 kilobytes per page, you know, each character being a byte. The average typist, a good professional key punch operator, can work at about 10,000 kilobytes per hour, which comes out to about 4.2 pages per hour. At $12 an hour, that is equal to $2.86 a page. At $10 an hour, $2.38. Now, as an example, take what's actually a very small and very limited digital library project. 500 documents, 25 pages each. It's 12,500 pages, which is about a year's work for one person to do. Now, Is that the total cost? No, it's not. Now you have to verify the data. If you're going to double key with verification, again, as I mentioned before, that is the most accurate method, you've got a cost increase factor of about 2.3. So the total cost for 500 documents, 25 pages each, double-spaced, so most printed pages are single-spaced, you're talking $82,138. Site proofreading, which is not as accurate. You can have it keyed in once and then proofread, or you can have it scanned and then proofread, which is about the same cost. So a cost increase factor of 1.6, you're down to $57,000. Now, does this mean you should never even consider a digital library project? Maybe not, depending on what you're talking about. But again, I think as far as public service goals of certain materials, you have really valuable stuff that you'd really like to share with the world, this in fact could be a cost-effective method of making it available. There are outside vendors that specialize in digitization. Most use offshore labor, and depending on their accuracy, timeliness, how quickly they do it, 75 cents to $2 a page is about the range that you'll see. That's a big price difference, but you can get very large differences in quality. I've personally been able to get quotes as low as 50 cents per page, but that was a proposition where we had very clean text to begin with. The vendor was allowed to take all the time that they wanted to, so basically fit in a little bit of our stuff between each one of their paying projects. And with about 98% accuracy, which is not a whole lot of cleanup from just a straight scan. But it would be presentable, and it would be done, but for 50 cents a page. So total cost for the sample project, 500 documents, 25% pages per document, double-spaced, is about $9,000 to $25,000. So still very expensive, cheaper. Conversion to text using OCR. You can do this in-house or, again, with a vendor. As I also mentioned before, even excellent OCR software with good originals to begin with, you need to do extensive proofreading and reformatting. I've been doing experiments with this, with materials that we have to scan, and particularly with the formatting. Formatting normally, if you're converting an OCR into straight ASCII text or even to a word processing format, almost all of the original format of the document is completely destroyed, and in many cases it makes it unreadable. The words are all there, but you get, odd fonts appearing right in the middle of the document for no apparent reason, and, along with all the typos. As far as OCRing, vendor costs are comparable with key entry costs. In-house costs, you've got proofreading, you've got the data entry costs, about 10% cheaper than that for keying. Equipment, really good scanning equipment starts at about $10,000 per unit. There are very good scanners that are out there now for less than $100. But when we're starting to talk about real good bulk material scanners, Panasonic makes some really good ones. Minolta makes some very good ones. There's trade-offs as to what you can get. Basically, the ones that are available now, if you can sacrifice a book or the material you've got is not bound, then you can get things like Panasonic duplex scanners. They're very nice. They look like a little mini tower computer. They have two little things that come out the side. They'll take about 500 pages per batch and scan each page and scan both sides of it simultaneously and do some really fast output. Yeah, they start about $10,000. Similarly, if you've got a book that you don't want to destroy, you can get an overhead scanner. And I know last year ALA was in Philadelphia, so I got to see some of the stuff Minolta had. And there are some very good overhead scanners right now that do a very good job with just passing over the top of a text that you can hold down with your hand, and it'll take a very good image of both pages at once. It takes a lot longer to do, but at least you keep your book. You've also got to think about preparation costs. If you've got a bulk scanner, if you can destroy your book, and if that's not a problem, then fine. You can do that and use a bulk scanner, save a lot of money. If you don't want to destroy the book, you've either got to photocopy it, or, as I said before, you can get a book scanner. So the other way to go about doing all this, in a way that, for the most part, is a lot cheaper, although I know Mr. MacDonald is going to talk to you about a project which is probably not cheaper, but there are good reasons for that. But the advantages of conversion to image. It's normally much cheaper if you're using a scanning method, particularly if you can use bulk scanning and then leaving it as an image. All of those costs that I was talking about and all of those cost increase factors just disappear. It's faster. Scan it, save it, you're all done. However, for certain archival projects, images are the only choice for creating a good representation. If you've got an artifact that you want to be able to preserve and present as an artifact itself, and not just as something converted to ASCII and text, then conversion to image is what you really need to do. The drawbacks of conversion to image, you always need special software to view it. It's not going to come up properly, usually with just a browser, unless you're converting to JPEG or something. File formats are harder to migrate as technology changes. The files also tend to be huge. Very often at least 10 times larger. So lots of disk space is needed, lots of bandwidth needed at both ends. And for something that you really want to roll out to the public, this is something that you have to think about very hard. Taking a 5 megabyte image and having people hit on it, especially if it's something that's going to be popular. If it's getting, 500 hits a day on something that's really huge, that's going to tax your resources just as much as your client's resources. They're going to be sitting waiting forever for things to appear, and your servers are going to be severely taxed. Another thing to think about is usability. Text documents, you can have a search engine index it and make it automatically searchable in full text, things like that. Those are things that you can't do with an image. Again, images are better for limited circulation where expertise can be assumed and traffic will not eat up available bandwidth. To make images useful, they must be cataloged. That's a labor-intensive activity that is going to eat up the initial savings that you might have been looking for by not having to proofread. Text documents, making them available. There are many freeware search engines that are available that are quite nice. We run Linux at Rutgers, and there's tons of freeware out there for that, including htdig, Glimpse, Harvest. We also use Freeways, although that is probably not a good choice for somebody starting out with this because I don't think it's supported anymore. htdig and Harvest are very good, and they're still supported. Tagging. Using XML, partitioning the documents into searchable sections, using meta tags is also a very good idea and something that you can do very effectively with text documents. I'd like to ask, who here is familiar with the idea of meta tags? Are many people here? Okay, about half of everybody. For people who aren't familiar with the idea, meta tags are used in HTML documents and web documents. Basically, it's a little bit of code that's stuck before the visible body of a document in a web document that can include all kinds of information. And there are some encoding schemes like Dublin Core where you can have a nice structured set of information that will give what is really the equivalent of a mini and abbreviated bibliographic record that will actually be embedded into the document that can be then indexed by a search engine that's capable of reading them and can be extraordinarily useful and can be done very quickly and efficiently. Image documents, making them available. Since they're images, it's very difficult to encode them with their own data, which means you need some sort of external search mechanism that will actually have all of your metadata and your indexing records. And I believe that's a good portion of what Mr. MacDonald is going to talk about in his presentation is what he's working with the Nuremberg archives. So instead of discussing that, that'll be Mr. MacDonald's thing to talk about, at least part of it. Any questions?
What do you think about using a PDF format with a text behind it so that you can still have searchable text and have the document viewable as the original?
I haven't decided yet. That's something that we're playing around with still now. In fact, what we're doing right now with documents that we're getting from the Office of Administrative Law in paper form, we are converting it to PDF, and we're saving text versions of it. And we're starting to play around with it, but we haven't rolled anything out as yet. The results are not bad. I don't think they're quite as nice as I would like them to be, and I'm trying to think of ways that that can be done to make it better. Things like bulk spell checking, which will correct obvious errors without having to have intensive human interaction. And the cost of intensive human interaction are things that I'm starting to play around with to see if it can be made efficient and also accurate enough to warrant using. What I'm doing right now with the PDF documents that we have is I'm just trying to make the best indexes that I can. Fortunately, the way that the Office of Administrative Law in New Jersey goes, we get initial decisions in digital format. Those are indexed in full text. And then later on, we get these final decisions. And so the final and the initial decisions are very closely related to each other. So I can put a link inside the initial decision, have people search the initial decisions in full text, get results up, and then if there's a final decision available, they've got a link right there. So that cuts out some of my concerns. If I couldn't do that, I would have a lot more work to do, because then I'd have to come up with a whole big indexing scheme for these PDF files that, quite frankly, I don't have the time or money to consider doing. So, if I couldn't do it, I probably wouldn't have these things available.
Has the experience of the JSTOR project been useful? I think they use PDF.
I've read some of the articles that they have about how they're doing what they're doing. And again, if memory serves correctly, it's pretty much what you were mentioning, is having something scanned to ASCII, making that searchable, and then presenting the PDFs. My experience using JSTOR is that it's working very well for them. And again, a lot of this, when you're talking about doing something like that, the amount of money and time that's going to be involved in doing it is very dependent on the quality of the originals that you've got. If you've got very clean originals, they'll OCR nicely. And even if they don't look very good and they're not presentable, you'll still have something that when it gets indexed for searching is going to give you very good results. If you've got something that's not in good condition, you're going to have to, in order to get good search results, you're going to have to do something with it. Now, what I'm not sure about as far as JSTOR is concerned is what they're doing with their not-so-good originals, is whether they do a lot of proofreading or not. I suspect they do. And again, that's something that you just have to spend the money on if that's what you're going to do. Okay, well, I thank you for your time, and I'll turn everything over to Mr. MacDonald.
John Jorgensen's talk was a very good lead-in to this project that we have. A lot of issues I won't have to even mention because he brought them up and he discussed the pros and cons much better than I could have, or he had even planned to. So it's good that he was able to bring those up and discuss them. A lot of the downsides of the things he mentioned can be solved with a lot of money. So if you get a lot of money, you can outsource big chunks of that. And we were able to get some funding and finally found a project that we found worthy of the donor and the money they were giving, so we could use it well, and I'm going to present that project today to you. A couple things. Can you have a whole show of hands of who's a librarian? I thought so. Anyway, who's a tech type? Techie? Okay, good. There'll be things for you too. And any law professors, professionals? Okay, thank you very much. This talk is about the Harvard Law School Libraries project to digitize the Nuremberg trial documents that we have. In order to set a context for that, I have a few statements about the Nuremberg trials themselves that gives you an idea of why we chose this project, and also about the documentation of the trials, which are unique and caused us a lot of problems in metadata-wise. How do we give people access to all these documents? Because we're going to digitize the documents, and as John said, you can't search the digital image. So we had to come up with some indexing, and that's where the bulk of our money has gone so far, is paying someone to do the indexing. So I'm not a historian nor a legal scholar. My specialty is swapping hard drives. And so the materials I'm going to give you now on the history, just a few paragraphs on Nuremberg trials, come from secondary sources, or our analyst of the documents, who is a PhD in history, and he's approved some of these statements. After World War II, the victorious Allied powers, that is the U.S., Great Britain, France, and Soviet Union, decided that the men most responsible for starting the war be held accountable and tried for their crimes in waging that war. In particular, these crimes were raised as crimes against humanity, especially their efforts to exterminate the Jewish people. After some debate, it was decided to proceed with a public trial of these individuals. In 1945, a tribunal consisting of 4 judges was selected, consisting of 1 judge from each of the 4 Allied powers, and the trial was held in Nuremberg, Germany. This trial became known as the International Military Trial, or the IMT. It's an abbreviation that's widely used in the secondary sources, because of the participation of the multiple nations, the U.S., Great Britain, France, and Germany. And there was, as I mentioned, 1 judge from each country. There were 23 defendants, and they were all close confidants, military and political leaders, friends of Hitler, and his type, including Bormann, Hess, Goering, names you'll probably recognize. These defendants were charged with 4 types of crimes. Crimes against peace, crimes against conspiracy against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Things that are not easy to prove and require a great deal of documentation, because a lot of the people who died, none of the people who died can witness these things. There were a lot of survivors, but their testimony was considered to be tainted, and we'll look at some of the implications of that. My understanding is that this was a landmark trial because it was the first international war crimes trial, and probably the most extensive one held today. And there are many that have taken place since then, and many that are ongoing or being planned now. And the importance of these documents could be as showing how previous trials were handled, how they were documented, and what stood up as evidence in court. During the investigation for this trial, the IMT trial, the U.S. and British investigators discovered literally tons of documents. As we all know, bureaucracies are if they're good at anything, it's in producing lots of documentation. And the bureaucracy of the Third Reich was very typical. They wanted to document everything they did, and it's surprising what you'll find that they document. If they were told to go out and round up 500 Jews at a factory, they documented. I went out and I did my job. Can I get a raise or get a better position? So the documentation was there. It was collected by the investigators and as evidence to be used against these defendants. In fact, the decision was made that because the documentation was so vast and so damning, they thought that they would base their case based on primarily documentation. So there was a big emphasis in these court cases on the documentation itself, because the documentation was written by the people, in many cases, who were the defendants themselves. Of the original 22 defendants, Some were acquitted, some were found partially guilty, but 12 were found guilty, sentenced to death, and hanged in October of 1946. Now that was the International Military Tribunal of the major leaders. But after that trial, there were 12 more trials held by, each one held by a different country. The United States conducted the trial of the doctors who performed experiments on prisoners. And the British conducted the trial on the leaders of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. There are also trials of Third Reich judges and as well as industrialists whose companies supported the Nazi party's plans. After the original, there were 12 of these subsequent trials. After these trials were complete, the size of the documentation that was collected, they estimated to be over 100 tons. But the documentation did not all exist at that time in one location. It had been, when the documentation was first gathered from all the sites right after the war, it was just too vast for any one group to handle. So they split it up throughout the Allied powers, and some in the United States, some in Paris, some Russia. And they were analyzed separately, and the photostat of the original was made. A German version was typed up, because almost all the documentation was in German, so it was typed up. An English translation was made of it, and a staff analysis was made of that document saying why this should be used as evidence, how it could be used as evidence, in what cases. So in many cases, each document can exist in several different forms. And each document, many of the documents occurred in many different of these cases. So we needed to keep in mind as we decided what we were going to do, how we're going to handle this kind of complexity.
Where had the originals from which the typescripts were made, were they in Fraktur or the German Gothic typeface?
None that I've seen, and I've probably seen 1%. Some of it is unreadable, but it's not that. After because these documents were all over the world, a decision was made by some group to make complete sets of it and send some of these sets to places in archives and universities where they could be preserved. A complete set was sent to the National Archives in the U.S. and a few other places, and then copies were supposed to be made and distributed to 25 different universities and archives throughout the country. They said that they wanted them to be as complete as possible, but it's not known that any of them was actually complete. It's such a big. We have 690 boxes. That's what we have, and ours is considered to be one of the more complete. But we know it's not complete, but we don't know of a more complete one. These boxes have been sitting in our basement or attics or wherever we could put them. When we needed room, we just moved them. For 50 years since the close of the war. Our scholars have come and used them from time to time, but the archives has now been closed because the documents are just too fragile. They're all yellow, as you'll see. We'll look at them, and they just crumble as you touch them. So we can't let people use them until we do something with them. And the plan was drawn up about 7 years ago to propose scanning these, but this was before the web, and we didn't know what we do with the scans. We put them on CD-ROMs. That was the plan. But we didn't have any funding then or these skills. No one knew what we were doing, so no, we didn't do anything at that time. But in '98, we received a grant from a foundation that funds Holocaust studies, and it was decided to try to do our Nuremberg Trials. However, 690 boxes is the amount of money we got wouldn't have digitized very much of that, as we'll see. It was decided to concentrate on just one case, and that case was the medical case. Other cases we're interested in are the judges' cases. Being a law school, that would be a doubly interesting case to try the Third Reich judges. But it was decided to do the medical case. The medical case had 23 defendants and took 132 days. The transcript is, what is it, Tom, 20 volumes? 22 volumes, big things like this, which has all of the oral arguments and all the witnesses of there were 62 witnesses, so all the testimony is there, and all of the testimony of the defendants is all there too. But it was decided that wasn't going to be our primary interest because that was already available in volumes, and we knew there were several of them around. It was decided, and I wasn't among the deciders, but that we would do the supporting documentation and the documentation from the trials themselves rather than the transcript of the trial. Unfortunately, our collection isn't complete either, but it's our analyst, who's very detailed in his work, has said that it has 98%. The site isn't on the web without a password. If you really, really, really want to see the stuff after the meeting, I think you use a password, which I can't guarantee that I won't change somewhere. But the project isn't complete. We've only got, at the moment, 100 images. They've got a lot more to send us, but the guy went on vacation, and I wanted them to send them before I came today, but he didn't do it. This is just the home page. But I wanted to show you a chart, a diagram. Love the documentation, so you get some idea, a better idea. We've covered most of this already, but I just want to show you a chart. This is the original case of Hitler's henchmen who were hung. These are the subsequent trials. There were 12 of them. We're doing the doctor's trial. The doctor's trial transcript of in-court discussions, witness testimonies, and court rulings, oral arguments is just one kind of document that we have to consider. The documents we're actually imaging are the supporting documents, which are down here. For example, if Himmler wrote a letter to Hitler on something, this represents that letter. From that letter, our analyst had to put into a database so it would be searchable the name of the author of that letter, the title of the letter, the language in which the letter was written. In some cases, we have documents that aren't in German. The letters would have mostly been in German. And any dates that would have been on that document in its original form. We don't have any of the originals, but we have photostats of the original. And so he does his analysis from the photostat of the original. From the trial transcript, our analyst has kept track for every document. The name of the case, so it's the Nuremberg Trials case, a number that was assigned by the group that sorted the documents, the page on which that document is cited in the transcript, the date on which that document is cited in the transcript, and that can be multiple times. A given document could have appeared in the transcript several times, several different dates. And when that happens, you get more than one NMT number, you get more than one case number, so it starts to get a little complicated for a given document, especially since the document can appear in 4 different formats. Here's an example of an original photostat of an original letter. It'll look different on your browser, but we scanned them. We didn't scan them. We'll get to that in a minute, how we did this. We outsourced them. But they're in color. The color is usually some shade of yellow. But we found that you could read it more easily. There were more details that came out if you looked at them in color. a German typing of that document would look like this. So someone, it's not a translation, obviously, if it was a German document, someone just retyped it, so it would be clear and everybody would know what was there. I don't know why those are underlined, but this is actually a transcription of that very document we looked at before. And it was translated into English for the English judges. Yikes, that yellow. That's just a browser problem, not the way the original looked. Here's your English translation. Very helpful, especially for people coming in to our website who can't read either one of the photostat or the photostat of the German. They've got English there as well. And an example of a staff analysis, an analysis that some prosecutor or defense lawyer or staff member made of this document might look like this. Just saying what the letter was, what's in there, how this might be used in a case. And here's an example of all those NMT numbers. This document has been assigned all of these numbers, and so our analyst keyed in all of those numbers. Each one is in a separate field and are all searchable. And in many cases, it's useful because all of these versions of that document have the same NMT number. So if someone hits on this document and they say, that's a great document, that's the one I want to see, and they want to see all the other versions of it, they just type in that NMT number and all those versions of that document will come up. And it will tell you on what page in the transcript it appeared so that you can pull out the transcript and then see exactly how that document was used in the transcript. The other side here shows you two other kinds of documents that we have. They're documents that were produced by the prosecution or the defense and used as actual exhibits. In many cases, and these documents were taken from, many of these were also used as exhibits. It's a little bit confusing, especially if you're better at swapping hard drives. But from these two documents, the German version of a discussion of this document. I don't have an online example of that. Sorry, not yet. But from these documents, we had to get the prosecution and defense exhibit number for that document, and the document book number. And the version name on all where it says version, we always trace what version of the document this is. In this case, we also traced the analyst's name. The reason we were doing all of this analysis in detail is precisely because you can't search an image. So if someone was trying to find a document with a certain person's name on it, you wouldn't find it unless you had analyzed it manually, which is what we used a lot of the money to do. Our project staff consists of 3 people at Harvard. The project manager, she's a reference librarian who has an interest in international law. She's an international law librarian, Ms. Silkasal. She did all of the interfacing between us and the scanners and the university and anybody who was involved in the project. She coordinated it all. And then we had the second person who was this analyst who worked 10 hours a week. This has been doing it about a year and a half. And he's, at the end of this month, he'll have finished the entire medical case. And then myself. I do the database work, design the database by looking at, our analyst, his name is Matt. He, on paper, for a couple months, started analyzing documents. And he came and showed me what he wanted to trace. And the only database programming I had done was a staff photo directory for our intranet. And this looked very daunting. So I started out and I laid out the fields and the tables as best I could. And then I went to some Access training, Access 97, because that was the language I had done the other database in, and I wasn't about to learn a new one. I didn't think this would be that hard, just extending it a little bit. But it turned out we had 52 different fields that he could fill out for any given document. There's no document that has all 51 fields. But he had to consider them all for every single document. And some of the documents had multiple instances of dates, multiple instances of energy document of numbers. So his job was, it was difficult, but my job was hard too. He'd bring me those lists, and he said, "Oh, I forgot I need to be able to trace more than one date for this document. Oh, I forgot I need to be able to trace more than one date for its transcript, for when it appeared in the transcription. Oh yeah, I found that not only can it appear in these 4 cases, there are 5 other versions that it can be in. It turned out that there are 9 different versions that the same document can appear in. And no flat database is going to be able to handle any of this. Even Access started to choke after a while. If you've ever written an Access database, you know what tables look like and the relationships that you have to set up. This is the database design for my Access database to show the relationships of all the different fields to each other. Yeah, I don't know if you find a little Linux or something. MySQL. Anyway, it works. And the analyst says the database has never crashed. So I feel pretty good about that. The other tools we use are, it's on an NT system that we have this Access setting on. Well, I do all my work on Windows 95. But we put the database table itself on an NT server so that lots of people can see it. And then after about 6 months of developing the database, we started talking about the web. And I had done my photo directory webpage, and I had done this database, so I knew how it was designed. Then we got Tom Bruce involved, because he'd been involved a lot earlier in giving us advice on these things, some of which we took. I'm not sure I should.
Most of which wisely they did not.
I'm not sure I'd go with Access 97 again, but it was the tool I knew, and it was a pilot project, and I was the only person they had to do this. So if it wasn't that, it was nothing. So that's why we went with Access 97. For a pilot project, it's fine, especially if it's a tool you know how to use it. You can convert later. For the web, though, we wanted to have database access to it. So, without going through all the text documents here, we have a bunch of stuff you can read about the trials, about the history, which I gave you. Let's go look at the database, because this is really what it's all about, is how to get at the documents. On the first page, it lists all of the different kinds of searches you can do. They're independent, and they're almost all point-click. So you can't make a mistake unless you do a keyword search. We'll do that in a minute. But let's look at an author search. There are about 500 authors in the who wrote documents that are part of the medical trial. And you can, if you know what their first name starts with, you can go to the list and choose the one that you're interested in. And you can choose the number of documents you want to display. And then it goes to the database and pulls out, tells you what your search was. You did an author search for PMN twofold on one item, highlights what you searched for. And you see this hyperlinking in there. We wanted serendipity to have a play in this. You don't always know what you're looking for when you're going into a database like this. This stuff has never been published before. These authors are unknown to you. So you've got to kind of play with it a little bit. Well, that's not really the guy I'm interested in. There's nothing else, no other hyperlinks. Let me go to see what else is about this defendant. So if you click on this, it'll go and pull out every record of every document that we have that was used as a document against defendant George Rogowski. In this case, we got 120 hits. So all of a sudden, you're quite productive. From a failed search at first, you can then go beyond that. And now we got more hyperlinks here. So if you go down here and see that I've got tags here for the field that the information is from. If there's no information, I usually hide the field. But if you want to see more information, say, I think that's the one I want. There's a more complete display. There's a long view of this that will show you every single thing we've got about that document. So that first one, there are probably more things than I showed in the short view. And you can read all about them. This document was used for in the trial against him, and these are the crimes for which he was being tried. And so, poison, that sounds interesting. Poison. What about photos? We have a lot of photos of these things. We're going to put them up, but there'll be some kind of warning at the beginning that you might not want to see. You might, just to tell you what you might see if you go in and look at the photos. There's a lot. There are autopsy photos of failed experiments, photos of experiments in the middle, the end, very gruesome things. But they'll be there. At the moment, we don't have the photos. We don't have the documents we've done so far didn't contain any photos, so we don't have any photos. But what you do if you search it, if you click here on poison, it goes out and finds every single document that our analysts considered to have to deal with poison crimes in the medical trial. Again, this is only the medical trial. So it shows you that you were searching for poison. Now, we haven't seen any images yet, and that's just an author search. But let's see if we can get let's do a keyword search so we can see some images. Let's say if you're, as a reference librarian, you get a question, someone says, I know there's a letter I heard about and talks about the treatment of insane people. So the syntax is the rules are down here. They're pretty standard. You have to end your things and have to quotations around strings. You click on that. Goes to the database. By the way, this database is sitting on a Pentium 120 in Boston, and got 128K RAM, but it's a pretty modest machine. It's pretty fast. Pretty proud of that. So it shows you what your search was. On 11 hits, highlights what you were searching for, and you say, well, that doesn't look exactly like the one I'm looking for. You say, well, no, that one. Yeah, that one was by a letter to Frau Buch. Yeah, that's the one. I remember that one. Well, you can do a couple things. You can either add it to your list, like a shopping cart. You say, I want to look at that, but I don't want to look at it right now. I want to go through here and get an idea of what I find. So you click here, and it'll add it to a list. Just remind you that's what's happening when you click there. If at this point you want to see it, you can click here, and it shows you it's starting a list of documents that you decided to hold. You can delete the list here if you want. We'll come back to it later. It uses a cookie to do this. So if your browser doesn't allow cookies, that's one feature you can't do. But other than that, I don't think there's anything that you can't do with almost any browser. Let's this one, I can actually view this one. It's got 6 images in it. So this says not yet viewable. But this one I can. I'm going to do it quick. These images, each page, come on. I-85 sometimes doesn't show the first page immediately after we try it. Something we have to work on now. Tom Bruce, we owe him a great deal of gratitude for setting up this page viewer, P-Flipper we call it. These old-fashioned icons I made, but the functionality is all this. So it shows you what document you're looking at here. That's the title. If it's not clear enough, you can click here, and it'll zoom in on it for you. There's your English, that's the English version of that document. You can probably read that. Good. None of these documents are perfect. Or you can print it, and if you print it prints out 1 page per 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. It comes up quite nice.
When you get a summary of the number of hits you've done, is that going to represent only one version of a document, or might all 9 versions?
Yes, they should all.
So that would be 9 hits, different versions of the same document.
If the criteria you put in was precise enough to get just that document. online, it should be there. But there's a trick. Let's go back. If you click here, well, let me show you some of the other tricks in a minute. But I think you can go back down, make it a little smaller. If it's a photo, you might want to rotate it, or if it's a chart or a map, if you push the rotation button, you can turn it sideways. And you can navigate, and you can go to the next page, keep it sideways. These cache one page in advance of where it thinks you're going. So if you're looking at page 3, it's caching page 4 before you get there. And then you can go to that beginning, go back to go to the end, or you can rotate it back to its original orientation. When you're done, if you click here, you'll go back to the index that you were at before you went there. So let's go down and find that document again. This is related to your question. We want to find all the instances of this document, no matter all the versions. If you click here, that should do it. Because all of those versions have the same NO, have the same NMT number. They might have multiple numbers, but you're pretty likely, like the analyst tells me, to get all those versions. So let's try that. So you've got 4 versions. They should all be the very same document, just different versions. This is an English case version. This is the English typescript of the original. This is a photostat of the original, which isn't there right now. And we can look at it. We did look at it. And then this one is the German typescript, which is there. So that's the database.
Well, show them the sound X. They're really good.
Well, the sound X, one of the bells on this list here. I don't know why it's taking longer for that image. Let's go back. A lot of the names in the database are Germanic, or German, with German spellings. What do we do about Untitled? You never know exactly how to spell some of these names. And a lot of Polish names. So there is an additional search set up called Soundex name search, and you can guess. Now, how would you spell Schmidt? There are lots of different ways, none of which is that, right? But you can try that. And say, okay. So we went out and found out as many people whose names sound like Schmidt. And there you go. And it gives you the records that it hits, shows you what did hit. Pretty cool.
So why does Frederick Santi show up in that list?
That's, which one?
Frederick A. Santi.
Well, that's sounds like Schmidt, doesn't it? It's a very broad sound comparison. It's got SNT, it does consonants primarily, and so you'll see a similarity. You never know. Yes?
Well, when will the database be available? What's your projected time for?
One thing I didn't show you is why this is going to take some time. It's go back to the site, project workflow. We're outsourcing some of this stuff, so some of the stuff that's not getting done timely is not our fault. This is what happens. We get a document, a box of documents. We have to send away for these because they're not held on site. Someone sends us the document. Our analyst puts them into folders, catalogs them, types them into the database. The database goes on to our metadatabase server, which is just an empty box. He sends those folders as he catalogs them. Well, no, he's cataloged a lot more. As the digitizers are ready to receive another batch, he'll send them a box of documents. They'll photograph them. They do it as a photo camera. They take pictures of these. And this is at the Widener Library at Harvard. They have a big photo studio they've set up that will do this digitizing. They send a JPEG back to us by FTP to one of their other servers, a Linux server. And then we have a TIFF sent to the university storage system, and that's put on tape. It's a 15 megabyte file that's sort of a preservation tool, but it's not just preservation because we are going to keep the documents too, so this isn't getting rid of 500, all those boxes. But if we ever need, if someone requests, they say they see an image with a little scribbling on it, but the JPEG doesn't show it to them, they might want us to print out or send them a TIFF, an image, so they can look at it more carefully. Or for publication, someone might want to publish these, and the TIFFs are available. We can get those on a 24-hour turnaround. So they send the JPEGs to here, and then they send a box back to Matt, and then he sends it back to the archives. Eventually, users are going to be able to come in through the internet, through the firewall, into the university system, to our server. We're going to combine these two, the metadata database with the image, and make probably a Linux box that'll sit over here behind their web server and their firewall, and that's how people will see it. Now, getting to your questions, when it's going to happen is these people are taking a long time. They project that they'll be finished with the medical case in 56 weeks. They're dedicating one person 1 day a week to do this project, because they have other projects. They just don't have enough staff. So I would say they do want to get the project up before all the imaging is done, but I would say probably.
Did you say how much this is costing? Is there any kind of estimate of that?
What would you like costed out? The image per page? It's over $4 per page to get a photo image. These people are charging us $4+ per page. Our analyst is also paid like 10 hours a week, so figure that into it. And there are no other. These people are going to store this for free. The storage space is free. So we lucked out on that because there's a big university push to get digital stuff going, so they're making some things free to encourage people to get them going. Our big costs are the analysts so far, and then the imaging is going to be a big cost too. And our money will probably run out by the time this project is done. But if this project is successful, then there are other people who are standing in line to fund it again. So we're hopeful. The next case we hope to do are the judges' cases. Okay. Watch your evening news. I think this will be announced someday, and then you'll know that it's open for business. That's it. Thank you very much for coming.